On a Monday, what's up? What's happening? It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Hope that you are having a fantastic Monday. Anthony, was that? I feel like I'm getting feedback. Oh, there we go. That's a 5-point fine for me for not muting my laptop on a Monday, but we're rolling, so we're good. All is well. Hope that each and every one of you had a great weekend. The first weekend of the Josh Harris era. Yes, that is, now everything is the first of this, the first of that on the Josh Harris era. But for Harris, had to be an incredible weekend celebrating. By the way, Anthony, did you catch Magic Johnson and what he did to celebrate this weekend?
I did not see that.
He went back to Italy. Apparently, he had been in Italy with his family, just, whatever part of Italy rich people go to. And then he came back. Or he came back here, like to the States, did the thing on Thursday, Friday, and then on Saturday went back to Italy, which is nice for him. I would like to be able to do that in my life. Just jet around to and fro Italy. That sounds delightful. Alas, I jet to and from Half Street, and we do a radio show. Just a good time. Magic's put in a life of work to be able to get to the point that he can do what he does now. But Josh Harris and his ownership group put a story. It's not really a story. They took out an ad, is what it is. They paid for it in the Washington Post. Nikki Javala did write a great story in the Post about Harris and kind of the path from childhood to owning the team, and how he and Mark Ian have been friends since kindergarten, and now they're in this together, how Mitchell Rales enters the equation, kind of all of the local guys, pathways from their youth in the D.C. area to being the owner of the football team. But Harris took out a full page, they call it a wrap in the Washington Post, which is funny in one sense because it's very old school, but I think there's enough people that still get the Washington Post that it registers, and it's more of the idea of like, yes, we can put this online as well, but we want more people to see it than just people that consume our stuff. We want everyone to see it. So the younger folks that perhaps don't subscribe anymore, don't get the paper thrown at the door, will see the digital version. And folks who still get the paper thrown at their door will get the paper version. Alas, the letter says, "Dear Commanders fans, this week my partners and I were entrusted by the NFL with the stewardship of your great franchise. This agreement is more than simply a business transaction. We understand that we are taking on the responsibility of managing a public trust." Honestly, that could have been the entire letter. It's like, what is the difference between the Dan Snyder administration and the Josh Harris administration? The Harris Ownership Group, a.k.a. HOG, which is awesome. My guy Teresh was the first one I ever saw use that, but it's just, who's the HOGs? The Harris Ownership Group. To understand that it's not his team, which, by the way, if we're speaking factually, it is. As much as we conceptually think of sports teams as a public trust, and there are reasons to say that they are, they need the public support. If the fans don't go, there's no team. Fans don't support it, there's no team. And that way it's the same as any other business. Like, it's just the city's name is on it. If Magic Johnson's movie theaters in PG County don't have anybody going, they shut down. They're not. If you're a local restaurant, don't need to tell anybody in the restaurant business. That's one of the hardest industries in the country, in the world. Like, you don't have patrons, your business shuts down. The NFL is a lot more foolproof than a restaurant, but it is his team. He's the one in charge. He gets to make all the decisions. But understanding that the whole reason it exists in its current form is a public trust, and running it like that will lead to better results, I think, is a good approach to have. Anyway, he also says, your great franchise. Like, this does belong to the fans. And just so folks understand, like, the history of sports in many respects, and I'm talking like the real history of sports, actually is true public trusts. And it really was the town's team. Like, the town owned it. English soccer is the biggest network of this. Obviously, now at the highest levels, there are no clubs. They're owned by billionaires, including some American billionaires. But for instance, in Germany, the Bundesliga, the top league in Germany, it's required that the fans still own. And it is truly what the Green Bay Packers are, where it's owned by a large number of people, and it is a public trust. But to treat it like that, I think, is remarkable, and it shows, and at the very least, the most cynical version of it is it's great marketing. But even understanding what great marketing is puts Josh Harris ahead of what the last guys did. Last guy specifically. So if he truly does feel that way in his heart of hearts, the most generous version of this is this feel-good story that makes me go, wow, this guy gets it, and I really am pulling for him. The most cynical version of this, at least that I can think of, is, hey, he's actually a smart businessman. Excellent work, Josh. So that's good. His letter continues beyond this very simple yet all-encompassingly important first paragraph. As a lifelong Washington football fan who grew up here in Chevy Chase, I know that the Commanders are more than just a sports team. This franchise is an institution passed down from generation to generation. Whether it was the stories my parents told me about Sammy and Sonny, or the stories that I tell my own children about the team under Coach Gibbs, 3 Super Bowl rings, 8 playoff appearances, and 154 wins, the organization has a rich history of excellence and success. I remember walking into RFK as a kid and feeling the stadium physically rocking with energy. It's that feeling and the power of this franchise that brings people together. And it's that excitement and commitment to winning that we aim to bring back to Washington fans today. It's no secret that these past few years have been tumultuous for our franchise and our fans, but today marks a new era for the Commanders. From day one, it is our top priority to deliver you a championship-caliber team. With a proven track record of winning across sports and business, we invest and plan for long-term success. We listen, we learn, and we are eager to immerse ourselves in this franchise to guide it with the respect and dignity it deserves. Most importantly, we hope to earn your trust. We look forward to meeting you in the community and soon at FedEx Field and learning how we can make the maximum positive impact. Our promise is simple. We will do the work, create the culture, and make the investment needed to deliver for this team and for Washington. We will strive every day to ensure that we are a franchise you can be proud of. And that beginning that I harped on earlier and the end are the most important thing that sandwich a very, very well written and I think very well thought out middle. Like, yes, they will do all those things. Yes, they have had a track record of doing this and thinking about it on the long term, not just hunting short-term success. But one of the things that I said all, throughout this process is the one thing Josh Harris can bring you on day one. Everything else is going to take a lot of work. But the one thing Josh Harris can bring you on day one is that you can say, I'm a Commanders fan, and not have people look at you sideways. Not feel like you have to explain yourself, whether you feel like you should have or not. Because I know there's disagreement. Some people are unapologetic in their fandom. Other people are very apologetic or perhaps even put aside their fandom. But no matter where you were on that spectrum, you can now today go, yeah, I'm a Commanders fan. Yeah, that's cool, right? Yeah. And you just mosey on about your day. No guilt, no feelings of negativity in any kind. And that pride that you can take in rooting for a team that you don't know is doing a bunch of garbage on a very human level is already a box ticked that wasn't ticked this time last week as we all waited for the final vote and ultimately the ink to dry. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Of course, then there's the work. So much of it to do for Josh Harris and company, including the stadium. What's the run of play in D.C.? Some of the city council members have put their voices on the record. We'll talk about it at 5 o'clock with Sam Fortier and amongst ourselves next here on the Team 980.
On New
the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Sam Fortier joins us at 5 o'clock. He is one of the folks, or Sam's written about everything. Sam's written about fan reaction, the name, the stadium situation, obviously the football training camp this week. So we'll get into all of the things. A commander's potpourri with Sam Fortier coming up at 5 o'clock. But I want to read a little bit from and kind of comment on the state of play in D.C. What I'll read from is a story that Sam wrote last week with his colleague at the Post, Megan Flynn. Actually, at this point, good gracious. Anthony, when did it become July 24th? When did that happen?
Time flies, man. Time flies. Also today, it's my grandmother's birthday, heavenly birthday.
Happy birthday, Grandma.
Thank you.
Up in heaven, listening to the show however she wants to. That's the beauty. Happy birthday. But July 24th, the story is from July 6th, and I can't believe that was 18 days ago. That's crazy. But ironically, the committee at play here in Congress is the House Oversight Committee, which is also the one that investigated them. It is currently under Republican control compared to the Democrat control it was during the investigation. So James Comer is now the chairman. He was the ranking member at the time of the investigation, was one of the people that was throwing hissy fits over the fact that the investigation was happening, but now is trying to help get the RFK site for D.C. To build a football stadium. So Rep. James Comer, a chairman of the committee, is preparing to introduce legislation and ultimately has that could ultimately allow the district to build a Washington Commanders football stadium or another mixed-use development at the decrepit RFK Stadium site, a major development in Mayor Bowser's pursuit to bring the team back to the city. A House Oversight Committee spokesman confirmed Thursday, this is a couple weeks ago to the Post, that he's preparing, the Comer is preparing the legislation that would allow D.C. to develop the RFK site, which is on federal land, although he stressed it would not be a land sale. The spokesman said that details of the legislation have not been finalized and talks are ongoing with Mayor Bowser's office. So that is currently working its way through Congress, and Congress has one part to play in this. The other two main players are D.C. City Council and the mayor's office. Mayor Bowser has made absolutely clear that she would like the team back in D.C. And I think that certainly amongst the Commanders fan base, that is the majority opinion. Certainly there are some folks that would like to stay in Maryland because they live in Maryland and that's their place. I don't think there's any – I think like one of the telltale signs that it's the most popular thing is like I don't know any Maryland folks that are like, yeah, I really wish the stadium was in Virginia. I don't know any Virginia folks that are like, yeah, I really wish the stadium was in Maryland. I love driving the land over. You do have people in both places going, yeah, FedEx would be – or not FedEx, RFK would be amazing because it's the spiritual home of the team. And because it's centrally located or as centrally located as you can possibly find in the region. And so the question becomes, can D.C. City Council, the biggest roadblock here, get on board with bringing the team back to D.C.? Because I definitely would think that Rails and I put Mitchell Rails first because he's the one who's going to do a lot of this work. He's very well connected in political circles, which is where you need to be connected. And Josh Harris are going to go hard after getting that site if they think it's possible. And it really does beg, I think, a larger question that I think we should, and not we should, but we will be asking all kinds of different experts over the course of the next, let's be frank, years that hopefully we're still doing the show and that this process is happening, which is what is the benefit to a city to have a team? And specifically for D.C., right? D.C. does not have a lot of space. It is already a very busy city with not a lot of green space. There is, very limited parking in all kinds of places, and there's just not a lot of undeveloped land left. Obviously, in Anacostia, there's like Anacostia Park, which is being done up right across the river over my shoulder here. There are certain smaller parks. I mean, you have like your DuPont, or not your DuPont circles, your Logan circles, and things like that where people can kind of go sit. But like, it ain't like we got Central Park in this city. There's obviously Rock Creek Park, which is very, very different. And could theoretically, you probably develop some of the land in there. Sure, not for a football stadium. That size land doesn't really exist in DC, as far as I know. Obviously, over the other shoulder and out the window here, as we sit in southeast DC, there is all the Buzzard Point in Southwest DC, which has recently been developed around Audi Field, and we've seen what's happened there with the wharf and all of that. So there's just this question that folks on DC City Council who oppose this, such as Phil Mendelson, perhaps the most important and powerful member of the council, that say, is this actually, like, in a city that doesn't have a lot of space to build more city? It's one of the quotes I read in preparing for the segment from over the weekend. This was a quote that someone gave last year as this discussion was heating up. One of the city council members said, like, if this is the last place we have to develop more city, shouldn't we put more city there, not a stadium? And it's a compelling argument. If you're going to tell me you can get a large green space and housing, especially if it's affordable housing in a city where there isn't a lot, and there's been, obviously a lot of gentrification and expensive housing put in places where affordable housing used to be, more restaurants, more businesses, all that can open. Okay, I hear you, but my counter to that would be multifaceted, starting with, if that's the plan, then what have y'all been waiting for? RFK hasn't been in use since 2018 when Audi Field opened. And obviously it hasn't been the home of the Commanders since they went by another name in the late 1990s. So you've had all this time to try to come up with a plan and get something done before there were sports teams to consider, before the Nationals ever played there and then moved out, before DC, or when, since DC United moved out, and surely you could have been working on stuff when you knew they were eventually going to leave. You also could have kept the stadium up a hell of a lot better, and maybe DC United would still be playing there. But you've had a long time to come up with a plan, and here's someone that's coming in with a plan, which is not just a stadium, which I'll get to in a second, and your whole thing is like, wow, we got to keep it. Keep what? A big thing that needs to be imploded immediately? It's like a freaking health hazard out there. And all you've done is build a couple of fields in the shadows of the stadium. Those are nice. They're fine. What about the rest of it? And if you're going to make it a green space, then you need to make it a better green space. So that's thing one. Thing two is, why not both? And this is the thing that I think the Phil Mendelsons of the world and, the other city council members that oppose it just don't understand, is a stadium like this, as we've seen in Navy Yard with Nats Park, as we've seen across the street on the other side of Capitol with Audi Field, can spur other things to happen. It can also not. Audi, obviously, there's a lot of low-income housing around it still, and I'm sure that over time has the potential to change. And I think there's an argument to be had with people who study these things. Not geologists. They study rocks. Sociologists. That's the ologist I'm looking for. About the benefits and downsides and all of those things around it. But if you look at what's happening, for instance, in Frisco, Texas, around the Star, the Cowboys practice facility, which, by the way, is also a stadium where high school football games happen and you could host any other number of events, then it's not a stadium that gets 10 days of use per year. It's the center of a new economic neighborhood for the city that could have housing, have restaurants, have entertainment, and, by the way, could help pull an Olympics, a World Cup, and certainly a Super Bowl to the city. And while I know those things, there's some definitive ups and downsides in the history of those things coming to particular cities. The Super Bowl is a huge economic boom, for sure. The Olympics and the World Cup are terrible for places that don't already have infrastructure built. It's only bad if you spend billions of dollars to build something for it to be used for one World Cup, one Olympics, and then it just falls into dilapidated, basically what RFK is now, a la the World Cup stadiums in Brazil that were built in 2014. They got used for that World Cup, the Olympics in 2016, and now you got like stadiums in the middle of a rainforest that haven't been seen since 2016. It's not what's going to happen with this stadium. So I have yet to hear a reason why you can't do both. Why a stadium in that neighborhood outside of the neighbors don't want it, which is valid. I'm not trying to just push away the people that, actually live there. But outside of the neighbors don't want it, I have yet to hear a convincing argument that you can't get some of what people are proposing otherwise, and yet haven't done in the time since the stadium wasn't being used. And a stadium being there, I haven't heard a reason why it couldn't work. So let's talk about it. 301-230-0980. Particularly interested in hearing from DC residents, but certainly from everybody. 301-230-0980. Do you want to see the stadium back at RFK? Not just for the spiritual home reasons, but like we're actually talking about this as a local show with local ties, local cares, a town hall, if you will. Let's town hall the RFK site, and who knows, maybe this will come up at an actual city hall meeting. Play the tape from the Hoffman show. First, we got to give it to him. It's next. 301-230-0980 here on the Team 980. Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. So the run of play in D.C. is this. Congress, working on it. Mayor's office definitely wants it, but needs the city council to get things together. City council, very split. Let's help them make up their mind, you know? Do you want to see the Commanders back at RFK? Especially looking to talk to D.C. residents who, especially if you got a tie to the area, is this going to affect you in some meaningful way? But then again, it's something that affects everyone. D.C., Maryland, Virginia, because, you know, I don't want the stadium at RFK because I live in X and it's too far for me. Or whatever. 301-230-0980 is our phone number. Let's get things started with Billy. Billy, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Yeah, how you doing? I just wanted to take the opportunity to honor my favorite college professor, Dr. Wheeler, who used to say, if you build it, they will come. Of course, based on the famous movie Field of Dreams. And his theory was that when you do build such a landmark and monumental facility, everything will grow and build with it and around it, and it'll have a true ripple effect. And, you know, this was actually a history professor, so he would, like, you know, point out places like New York and these major cities that built things, and it just grew from there. So I think it'd be very positive for the city, and I hope it does come to D.C. It really, really is no fun driving all the way out to Maryland.
And Billy, just for
I believe burgundy and gold. So.
Yeah, so Billy, real quick before we let you go, just for our I don't know, our record-keeping purposes here, where are you in the DMV? Where is it that you would be driving from? Are you a D.C. person or are you a Virginia person? I'm guessing not Maryland.
Yeah, I'm D.C. Well, I'm in D.C. I'm between D.C. and Miami. But yeah, I'd be driving from D.C.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Appreciate the call. 301-230-0980. Phone lines are wide open, so you can go ahead and get in on this. 301-230-0980. To play devil's advocate / Phil Mendelssohn, it's a sentence I didn't think I'd say on the show today. I think what the opponents of this would tell you is a different version of what Billy just said. If you build it, they will come. What they want to build, though, is different. What they want to build is, maybe it's you know, DC's version of Central Park, right? A place people can go and enjoy a picnic with their family, and there's 20 restaurants within walking distance that you can go pick up food from, and there's affordable housing here and luxury apartments there, and you know, shopping and the whole deal. And it becomes a new hot go-to neighborhood that provides more opportunities for folks either in DC or in surrounding areas to move to and exist in at a higher number than they would if you take the footprint of a football stadium and put it there. What I would tell them is people in DC, like, DC is very, very, very neighborhood driven in a way that a lot of major cities can be, but I think is probably more severe. I don't mean severe as a bad thing, more intense than a lot of other places that I've been. And I've been to a lot of big cities. I've had the great fortune of traveling a lot in this country, a lot of it for football reasons when I was on the beat. But like in DC, if you live in, I don't know, if you live in Navy Yard, sure, you might, if you go to work and you got to go into Midtown or like, you know, downtown DC, you got to go to kind of that businessy F Street corridor, then sure, if you work at your consulting or your law firm or whatever that's there, fine. And obviously if you live in the suburbs and you travel into DC every day, fine. But for non-work choices, people tend to just hang out where they're at. Like if you live in Northwest DC in like the 14th Street, Logan Circle, DuPont area, like you can kind of walk most of and find everything you want to do. Even if you want to walk to and from your grocery store, nevertheless, if you want to walk to and from dinner, or if you're, you know, if for whatever reason you don't want to walk, it's a $5 Uber and you're fine. Same is true for Navy Yard. You know, if you live down in Navy Yard, you can go to any number of restaurants. You got your grocery store. Like the neighborhoods are very self-contained. And a lot of, like, will you occasionally go out and go across town for a one fancy dinner? Sure. But if you're looking to hang out, just like go walk out your door and hang out and go outside and sit, people go to the rooftop pools. It's one of the beauties of the city is with the building limits. A lot of people that live, especially, let's face it, in luxury apartments, have rooftops. And even if you're not in a hyper luxury apartment, like your building probably's got a roof and you can sit up there whether there's a pool or not. So like these kinds of things that in other cities, for various reasons, people travel across town to go to the thing or, drive here to do that other thing. It's just less likely here. So you need something that's going to bring people to the neighborhood. And while, yes, if they open a bunch of new restaurants in this RFK, whatever they want to call it, would people come from across town to try the new hot place? Sure. Would some people even consider living there? For sure. And maybe that's what they're going for. It's like, look, we can't build the housing that we want plus the football stadium. We need more housing. Fine. If that's your ultimate argument, I don't really know how I push back on that. But if you want people to discover an area that is completely not a new part or a part of their routine right now, because unless you go to like play a rec league, whatever, on the fields over there, nobody's going to RFK right now. And I guess that's kind of my thing is like, if you want to develop the area, you got to give people a reason to go. And a beautiful new stadium that's going to host every major concert, every, major potential type of sporting event. Like, right now, all the English Premier League teams are doing their summer tours. That'll be there. Beyonce's going to be at FedEx Field for a couple of days soon. Ed Sheeran was just there. Taylor Swift, I think actually skipped DC on this tour, but she's been there before. Like, I'm just picking the biggest ones in the world, but if that's not your cup of tea musically, like, fine, pick your artist that's doing the stadium tour. They'll be there. Like, people will go if you give them a reason. And the same types of stuff that exists in their neighborhood already isn't a reason to go. Let's go to Rob in D.C. Rob, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Craig. Appreciate you getting me on. Hey, I know what I'm about to say is probably not going to be popular with the radio station. I've been a long-time listener. I call in once in a while. I was born in Georgetown, and I grew up on my daddy's knee watching the Redskins. And I even before Sonny got there, I was watching them. And I bleed burgundy and gold. And I've seen many big games down at RFK, and I love that stadium. But I got to tell you, for me personally, where I am now, I wouldn't build a stadium in Washington, D.C. Again, it's not because, number one, I think that people have a sense that there's crime there. I would put it out, maybe not where they were talking about building it in Virginia, but it's somewhere in Virginia around Loudoun County where they got some land, and there's money out there. There's big money. We've lost so much of our fan base. Who knows if it will come back? I hope so. But I believe that out in Loudoun County, that's where the practice facility is out there, out in Virginia.
So, Rob, hold on. Rob, and nothing you said is going to get you in trouble with the radio station. If you had cussed, then yeah, you'd be in trouble with the radio station. But you didn't do that, so you're good.
Sorry, I appreciate it.
But you're gonna be in a little bit of trouble with me. Your solution here is to cater to rich people?
No, I'm not saying cater to rich people, but if it was my money, and I'm spending my hard-earned money, and I want to make sure that stadium's full, I put it where there's people who've got a lot of money, and because the fan base has dwindled so much, I know that there's a lot of fans in Northern Virginia that would support that team, and I just think that people would make the trip if they felt it was in a safe place. I just believe that.
Okay.
I knew it wouldn't be popular, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, well, Rob, the problem is your feelings aren't actually supported by really immense amounts of data. Like, there is a crime problem in D.C. It's not any more significant than it is in major metropolitan areas that have population density anywhere else in the country. Like, it's just not. And so if people want to, I'm not going to go to the most intense version of this rant, but like if people want to have misnomers about D.C., and look, again, I'm not saying there's not a crime problem. We have a crime problem in America, and that's exacerbated by things that are uniquely American. Again, that's a different show. But I think the solution to people's perception of crime in D.C. as a deterrent for the stadium is to educate them on the fact that that's actually not an issue, not to give in to rich people who live in Loudoun County that ran away from D.C. or just are rich and also, by the way, have options to do other stuff. Like, the diehard fan is the one who's stuck with it. Like, when I think of the diehard fan, the fans that I saw at the bullpen on Thursday, it wasn't tech Loudoun County guy in khakis and a button down. It's basically the opposite of that. It's people that have given their hard-earned money, even though they don't have a lot of it, to this team over the years. And I think catering to that will endear, or not, it's not even about endearing, and there is obviously a financial component here, but like, people will still come. You don't got to worry about anything in your super rich luxury box that will certainly exist no matter where this stadium is. 301-230-0980. All right, we got a couple more calls on hold. We'll get to y'all next to round out the hour. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980. Continue to take your calls, 301-230-0980. Now that Josh Harris is in control, it's on D.C. City Council to make up their mind about the RFK site. Can they come to an agreement? Might take a while. We'll see. Sam Fortier has a great lay of the land. We'll talk to him at 5 o'clock, but setting the stage with you at 301-230-0980. All right, let's pick up with the calls. Let's go to Cliff. Cliff, thanks for holding through the break. You're on the Team 980.
Hey, what's going on, Craig?
What's up, Cliff?
I'm in favor of them bringing the team back to the RFK Stadium site because it'll help develop that part of town over there. It'll bring jobs. It should build the economy. And that idiot who said something about crime in D.C. is crime over the whole DMV. Virginia is not a safe place to live at either. And I'll sit back and listen.
Thanks, Cliff. I appreciate the call, and that's 100% correct. The crime stats are, like, basically your crime stats are this. If there's people, there's crime. That's the data, simplified in a sentence. It comes down to population density. And once you do deeper dives into that, that's a different show. Just going to leave it that way. Let's go to Jim. Jim, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Yeah, it's Jim. Hey, thanks for having me on. I listen to your show a good bit.
Thank you.
So I'm not from D.C. I'm not from this area, right? But I'll be honest with you. I go to Ravens games in Baltimore. One, 'cause I'm a Ravens fan, but two, it's easier. The parking's cheaper, and there's something to do before and after the game. If I got to drive to Loudoun County, which I don't even know what's in Loudoun County, I'm not going. I don't go to Landover because I have no interest in going there, and I don't want to pay $1 bazillion to park. So I think RFK is the way to go.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Jim. Thanks for the call. Like, this is the problem with, for instance, Landover. In Loudoun County, as someone who's spent a decent amount of time there, like, because I covered the team, like, at least there's stuff to do. I will say that. There is stuff to do. One Loudoun has been built out, and there's a lot of other stuff that's been built out. I don't know exactly how far out in Loudoun County they would put the stadium. That is another huge, huge factor. If it's closer to the Fairfax County line, where you have your Restons and your Herndons and, Tysons and all that kind of stuff kind of along the way, then maybe it's a lot better. But that's a great point. Like, okay, if you're going to make a day out of it, what do? Do you just drive, go to the game, and then completely you have no choice but to go home and sit in traffic and the whole deal? Or can you go to dinner after a 1 o'clock game? Like, I can't tell you how many times I got done working in Landover and would have loved to just, like, go to a spot, and there's just not a lot there. It was something that was promised by the Snyders and the team, and they failed that promise. So it's something I know Wes Moore has promised to work on as part of the whole Blue Line Corridor project, the governor of Maryland, if they do wind up staying in Landover. But it's a huge problem. And that's one of the opportunities that RFK creates is you could build that around it. Think of not just going to, a game in Baltimore, for instance. Philly has built out, like, there's a huge one, all three stadiums in the same place. So, like, parking is great. And it's actually very convenient to go to a game in Philadelphia. There's great highway access. And, even though it's urban and people have concerns about urban settings, everybody goes. The SEPTA trains. Like, that's a great NFL stadium as an example. Baltimore's another one. There's stuff around the stadium that's not too far, that's walkable to the stadium. But think about what it's like to go to a baseball game at Camden or a baseball game at Nats Park. Like, you can go to dinner before the game and then walk to the stadium and do stuff. You can go to breakfast before the game and walk to the stadium and do stuff. You're not, like, yes, of course, the tailgate parking lots are great, but it's a great thing to be able to have things around the stadium and kind of make a day of it, considering it's now especially such a big investment. For what it's worth, I do get the sense that the Harris Group is going to bring the cost of everything way down. I don't know if they have time to do it this year because they might have already charged people for certain things and whatever, but I would anticipate parking and things that the Snyders just abused fans on for years to come way down very, very quickly. We'll see what they do with ticket prices and all that, but I do think that, if the cheap concessions they had at the event on Friday and any, buying people beers and these kinds of things are any indication, I do think that improving the fan experience which would include a better value for your time at FedEx Field, is something that is a high priority for the Harris Group. Obviously, improving the fan experience is, I think that's one of the ways that they could do it. All right, let's wrap up with, is this Terrell? I want to get your name pronunciation right. T, what we got?
Hey, let's go with T, but it's Terrell.
Terrell, I appreciate it, man. What you think about RFK?
I'm from D.C. I live in Baltimore. Quick pushback. It ain't that much stuff around the Ravens Stadium unless you walk about a mile. So with that, unless you're gambling too, because that's right next to it. But with that,
that's pretty significant. But unless you're doing that for sports fans especially,
right.
That's huge. And the thing is, just real quick, a mile and a quick drive and easy parking is very different than what they got at Landover.
Facts. So I'm glad you even went there because I'm yay to RFK from a nostalgic purpose, but again, growing up from that side of town, let's not forget that bottleneck trying to get to RFK, coming off of 295, which is a disaster in the middle of a day on a Sunday, is not cool. And then East Capitol Street, a disaster. And then to say, oh, well, there's Metro there. That Metro station, I remember that, would be horrendous trying to get in and out of a game. So let's think about PG. Well, no, let's go to Northern Virginia. Kill it. Loudoun County, that's not happening. That's behind God's back. It's a horrible decision. PG, let's think about FedEx. The Metro is like a 2-mile walk away, so it's nothing really great. Capitol Boulevard was a disaster, but I do know PG is at least trying to build up that Largo area as like a downtown area for PG. Now, I work at the health department for PG. There's where the old PG hospital is, it's gone. It's right off of 295, right by 50, right near the Cheverly Metro station that nothing goes in and out of there right now. If they built up on that hill overlooking D.C., right there in Maryland, that's a pretty decent opportunity. The health department, I don't even know how long we'll be there. So that whole area is just prime for opportunity. So I'm like, let's think about that. And we also remember the debacle of 495 traffic trying to get in and out. But if they build up at least around FedEx and can get you closer to the Metro, which I don't know how you would do with those houses, then maybe FedEx could be a decent option. So I'm thinking they need to rethink another area altogether. But, yeah, that's kind of like what my thoughts are. It's kind of like a disaster on all of them for real, so you got to make the best of a horrible situation.
No,
I'll hang up and listen.
Yeah, no, Terrell, appreciate the call for sure. That's really great thoughts. What I would simply counter with is the problems around RFK. Remember, RFK is going to take the longest to build because of the way D.C. is in a million ways, from the unions to the red tape to cut through to the building restrictions that are just harder to deal with. Again, that goes back to some of the fact that some of this labor is needed as union work, and the contracts have to be worked out in a more complicated way than what they are in Virginia, where, as Michael Phillips joked last week, Virginia, whatever you want it to be. So that gives you time to repair and rethink the metro station, right? To start and hopefully complete construction on 295 to widen some of that bottleneck area. Some of these projects are already in the works, if I'm remembering correctly. Some of them, I think, would be a part of this. And, when you talk about the public money that could potentially go towards it, maybe that's something where, hey, the public money is going to go towards the public projects that would benefit everyone beyond the team, and then the team will, in exchange, will pay for the stadium and have the rights to the land to build on it. And that's kind of the compromise. I think these are the things that should be worked out. These are the problems that should be raised. But from a location standpoint and the potential to fix some of these things, I do still think RFK is the best spot, in my opinion. But anytime you're going to have 50,000 people, 60,000 people in one place, there aren't a lot of places in America, nevertheless the world, where you can do that conveniently with minimal traffic, etc. I do think studying that is probably smart. And, maybe Sam Fortier has some insight on it. We'll ask him next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We promise to not abuse this time, but it is time to bring in Sam 48 for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in, Not My Beat.
Of course, Sam is the Commander's beat reporter for the Washington Post. Mr. Fortier, how are you, sir?
I've never had anybody play an intro for me of like a previous segment I'd done on that show. So if it wasn't enough that we're Syracuse guys, you, me, and Ant, if it wasn't enough that Rachel is an incredible person who is making me like Craig even more for some reason, I'd be like, it's a conspiracy, man. It's good to be on with you, man.
I appreciate that, and I won't tell the journalism professors back at Syracuse that you're persuadable.
Yeah, this is the only time that you're getting me to be biased, for sure.
Yeah, as long as it's biased towards the show, then we'll take it. So we've spent much of the first hour of the show talking about what is certainly the biggest order of business on the table for Josh Harris and his ownership group, which is the stadium. You've been covering that fairly closely for the Post, including some of the legislation making its way through Congress. Let's start off before we get into kind of the run of play, specifically for RFK and DC, with what we learned over the last weekend and obviously Thursday and Friday about the Harris Group and how they're going to approach this. What did they say about not just what their priorities are, but who is going to be in charge of that process for this group?
Yeah, so I think the first and most important thing is that Josh Harris said that the number one priority for them is fan experience and winning on the field. You know, those are good lines for him. But I also think that they're true. Whatever you can do to upgrade FedEx, however you can help the football team win more games, I think that's where you start. Mitch Rales, one of the minority owners, obviously told my colleague Nikki Jabala that he thinks that they might have to get out a clean sheet of paper and start from scratch. And so that would be a pretty significant step for them, because obviously under Snyder, the Commanders narrowed it down to, I believe, about half a dozen sites, FedEx Part 2, RFK, Loudoun County, Prince William County. Those were some of the options on the table, but it sounds like they could, start from scratch and start saying, okay, what are some suitable sites potentially in the DMV? And if they do that, I think the timeline gets a little bit longer than you might have expected.
Right. So there's kind of a two-tiered timeline here, right? And it's what's the new stadium and what can they do at the current one. I did think it was interesting. Like, they had the super cheap concessions on Friday, and I realized it was like a fan-friendly launch event. But what are the things that you think they could do and that you might even expect them to do, whether it's this season or next, to make the fan experience at FedEx better while they wait on whatever is next?
One of the things that Josh Harris has talked about is ingress and egress, which is like the fancy business person term for like getting in and out of the parking lot. The thing that they do, I think the interesting thing to me is like that was Jason Wright's big thing last year and 2 years ago, ingress, egress, and talking about food and beverage and, increasing the quality and making it more DMV specific. So it feels like more like an authentic cultural experience rather than just, Johnny Rockets and a bunch of other national chains. So I think they have done some things in those regards. How much can the Josh Harris Group do differently? I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see what they do. Like, there's only so many ways you can organize that parking lot and the ways you can get in and out of it. But so to me, it would be continuing on those things. I think the biggest one would be lowering beer prices, lowering concession prices. I don't know if they have the financial appetite or wherewithal to do something like that. But when I think what is a splash move that they could make in terms of fan experience, in terms of making FedEx better, that would be my number one.
Right. I think that's 1A. 1B to me is parking. Like, it is a bore and it's terrible and there's only so much on your ingress, egress. But like, to go through the hell that is getting into FedEx Field and then having to hand someone $50, like, get out of here with that. If they lowered parking to even $20, like the goodwill that would buy them in the fan base, to me, would probably be worth it. Now that is a lot of money. That's obviously 50 to 25 or 50 to 20. I don't know what the averages are, but if that's the case, like, that's over half your parking revenue. But it is the kind of thing that Snyder got crushed for years for just making a killing on the fact that you have to park it at FedEx Field. There's no alternative options really because the Metro's so far, there aren't any other lots around, like kind of off-site lots. And just feeling like fans feel like they're not being taken advantage of. I feel like that any place they can do that is a button that they should push.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like, I think the logical extension to that is like, okay, what's one way to get ingress and egress better is like, could we have, a shuttle system, a quicker shuttle system from the metro stop that's about a mile away from FedEx Field? What are the levers that we're willing to pull? How far can we go financially, but also logistically, just what are we capable of? If you set up, kind of like they're doing for training camps, setting up an off-site gathering place where you can say, okay, the shuttle from here is free. I don't know what they're going to do, but I imagine that a lot of things are on the table, and it's probably going to come down to, what the balance sheet looks like on that.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out a lot of these we're about to find out what kind of ideas Jason Wright and his team have had the last couple of years that got said no to. Like, there's no way Josh Harris is coming in being like, I have all the answers. They were just sitting here in this folder, because he hasn't been thinking about this for the last whatever number of years because he's been busy doing other stuff. I'm sure there's been a lot of ideas that all kinds of people that worked at that organization have had that the Snyders were like, no, we're not paying for that. And now, all of a sudden the checks are gonna start coming through. So we'll see. Sam Fortier is with us here on the Hoffman Show. So that brings us to what's next. What is the state of play in D.C.? You've got the Congress's role, you've got the mayor's role, you've got city council's role. Let's start with Congress, because I know you wrote about that a couple of weeks ago. Where does this legislation to free up RFK sit?
So my colleague Megan Flynn and I reported that James Comer, the House Republican, was preparing to introduce legislation that would get RFK, that would extend and amend the lease at RFK, which would allow basically Josh Harris to put a new stadium there in a mixed-use development, which is currently forbid by the lease, putting a mixed-use development there with retail and housing and things like that would, obviously make it a pretty feasible site. But that has not been introduced yet, and I think that's pretty notable because on Friday, Congress is going to go in its August recess. So if you don't introduce it by Friday, you're then talking about September, and then at that point, you're going to start saying, hey, how many days do we have left in the congressional calendar? What does the floor time look like? And it starts a very long process. So that is what we're looking for this week. I think that they were trying to introduce it last week, but for whatever reason, it's held up. And so they're trying to introduce it this week. But we'll see if they can get that accomplished.
Okay, so that's Congress. That's the state of play there. The mayor's office is very simple, right? Bowser wants it, and as long as she's in office, then that's going to be rubber stamped if city council can get on board?
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think it's notable, and people should be aware that Bowser wants this really badly. And we've discussed before that, normally the person who would introduce this legislation is not a House Republican from Kentucky who has been messing with the city in terms of its crime bill legislation. It would be Eleanor Holmes Norton, the district representative. And so I think that the mayor, working with the team lobbyists who are up on Capitol Hill, them going to a House Republican is a pretty notable way to circumvent the district's representative in Congress. So the mayor, yes, she's on board, but she's also played a pretty instrumental role in making this thing happen and going around Eleanor Holmes Norton.
That is fascinating. And the reason she's doing that, from what I understand, is Eleanor Holmes Norton wants the city council to be 100% on board and the mayor to agree and everybody to be in a big giant kumbaya. Who are the problem children, if you will, on city council, or if you're opposed to this, the heroes on city council that do not want RFK used for football purposes?
Yeah, the vocal opponents to that plan would be obviously the chairman, Phil Mendelson. He's been out front, pretty against it, saying that we need, that we all need to see the report. The NFL needs to release the report into sexual harassment and workplace allegations. We actually don't know where Phil Mendelson stands on that following the release of the inquiry last week. And that still might not change his mind because he has other reservations, including, he believes that site needs to be used for affordable housing. And then the other one is Charles Allen, who his ward is actually, RFK is in his ward, and he's probably the other most vocal opponent to the team there. So
we've had 5 years now since since DC United moved out of RFK. 2018 was the last time it was used for any regular purpose. Now it's obviously fully dilapidated. Not that it really wasn't the last, 10 years that it was in use, but it's fully dilapidated, fully out of use. Occasionally people go in there for stuff and, you see these pictures of, plant growth and all kinds of things over the seats. It's brutal. It's just a waste of space. So my question to someone like Phil Mendelssohn would be, what kind of plan have you put forth? Because especially if a mixed use type of site is put forth by Josh Harris, do you think that will ultimately, satiate what Mendelssohn and others want, that there could also be affordable housing and a reason for people to go to that part of town and all the things that would come with a football stadium compared to just building another neighborhood in D.C.?
Yeah, so that is a pretty central argument, and I think Phil Mendelssohn has heard the mixed-use development before. I think there's multiple layers here. Charles Allen has talked about there should not be any zero tax benefits to billionaires to help them build their stadiums, and that still would happen if the mayor went through with the Audi Field plan to build Audi Field for DC United. The city did horizontal work. They prepared the land, some of the infrastructure for DC United to come in and do the vertical work, put the stadium there. And so, that is the current proposal, what Muriel Bowser has talked about in terms of attracting the Commanders. And I think that even might be too much for Charles Allen. And I think that, when you talk about 190 acres, which is how big the RFK site is, Charles Allen, Phil Mendelssohn, and others have said we need to use that for affordable housing. And we need to use all of it, a lot of it for affordable housing. But I think that proponents of the Commanders at the RFK site would say, whoa, 190 acres is a ton of land, and we can do a bunch of stuff with that. And that is probably one of the central arguments.
So that actually, Sam Fortier is our guest here on the Hoffman Show, gets us to a point that one of our callers made, which right now, although theoretically the centralized location and the metro all sounds great, like the bottleneck on 295 would be a mess. The metro station is a dump. Like it would just be super busy. Do you think that publicly funded, or even with the Harris Group, be willing to pitch in on some of this? There would be major infrastructure improvements around RFK if they went through with this plan, right?
Yeah, I assume there would be, and that cuts to the heart of sort of some of the things that people, some of the Harris Group members said in my colleague Nikki Jabala's story, which the profile of Harris, which came out yesterday, which is, Josh Harris really did stretch for this team. This was not something that I think that he could have come in and said, hey, I have $1 bajillion like a Jeff Bezos. This took some creative financing. It took a lot of, partners to do this. Does Josh Harris and his group have the financial capability of doing all of the things that they would need to do to get RFK online and, do it without city help, especially if you go to Virginia and Maryland and they are willing to give you taxpayer money, however much that may be. So, I think we may have talked about this or talked about it with someone else. What is the line? How much better does Virginia or Maryland need to be for the Harris Group to say, okay, we're going to give up on the dream of RFK, and we don't even know that's the number one site, but to give up on the emotional appeal of RFK, what does the financial imbalance need to be? These are questions I think they're going to answer over the next few months.
I think we did talk about that at Buddies. I just don't think we talked about it where anybody could hear it. So it's good that we did that here on the radio. Sam Fortier is with us here on the Hoffman Show. All right, last thing on this. Is there a place that you've heard rumored or one that's already on the list that you think would be an ideal spot for it, if not RFK? There's such gigantic holes in the plans for so many of these sites. But if they're going to start over and have a blank sheet of paper, they hand you the paper and go, Sam, write a place down. What's the place that you've heard that you go, I actually think that could work. That's a good idea.
I understand the premise of the question, and I appreciate where you're going, but it's hard to say something other than RFK because at the fan rally on Friday, in the middle of the mass of people as Magic Johnson's about to talk, people just started chanting RFK. I think the fan base has made very clear that RFK is where they want to be. If they cannot be at RFK, I think that there's a lot to like and dislike about sites in Maryland and Virginia, and I think the two that make the most sense are Loudoun County out by Dulles Airport, and FedEx 2, which would be across the parking lot. I think that, there are big downsides to both of them. There are big advantages, and probably the most, notable advantage in Loudoun County is the metro is right there. There's space. And in Maryland, it's, you can go across the parking lot. You already own that land. And Maryland, Governor Wes Moore is the only public official who has said that we are willing, that their jurisdiction is willing to put tax dollars on the table. Glenn Youngkin in Virginia has been much more reserved in saying this has to be right for Virginia taxpayers. And Virginia also has a lot of hurdles to jump through because if you remember in 2022, they basically have to pass a football stadium authority to fund any projects. If they want to give any taxpayer money to the Commanders, they have to pass legislation. And man, that is a lot of hoops to jump through, especially because they can't bring up legislation until their next General Assembly session, which starts in January. So there's basically Maryland, I know I'm rambling here, but Maryland is the only one with an executive who is saying we're going to give you taxpayer money and has the actual capability to do that.
Makes sense. All right, Sam Fortier with us here on the Hoffman Show. On the way out, non-Sam Howell category, your number one Commanders training camp storyline is?
Offensive line. We did not see them do very much in minicamp because it was a lot of passing and, they weren't hitting each other super hard anyway. Ron Rivera admitted that, it was hard to get a read on them. The offensive line particularly, and that's obviously a unit that hamstrung them last year. They had three problems last year: quarterback, coordinator, offensive line. They made big switches at two of them. They overhauled the offensive line a little bit, but they didn't spend premium resources on it. So how does that offensive line look, I think, is going to be a huge question.
Have you had an Andrew Norwell gets released story in your drafts?
Man, I don't know when that's going to go, but
I was going to say,
I wrote that in March.
if you do, it's time to hit publish. That just came down. So I'm going to let you go.
oh, literally right now.
Yeah, it just happened. So go find that one in your drafts. Send it, make sure everything's spelled correct, and hit publish. Andrew Norwell just got released.
All right, cool. Thanks,
All right,
guys.
see
I'll see
you
you later.
Bye.
Bye.
That's Sam Fortier, everybody. He's got work to do because Andrew Norwell just got released. That happened like 90 seconds ago. Good producing on that, Anthony. Way to get that in front of me. So yeah, that's. Do we want to even hit the breaking news? I don't even know if at this point, we don't think we need the breaking news sounder. That's the only story that's taken as long as the sale was Andrew Norwell getting released. So now it's official. I guess he probably came in for whatever. They're probably like, hey man, you don't need to come in. It's good. You don't need to come back to DC. Also, did you see that Trey Turner was visiting the Saints? Yeah.
I did see that.
Yeah. So big day in former Commanders land. Those two guys are they the first former Commanders? I mean, Heineke too. Guys that were with Ron in Carolina, with him in Washington, and then gone. I mean, Thomas Davis had the 1 year here.
Yeah.
I guess he was first because he was here year one and then he retired. You're thinking, you're in deep thought.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other commanders.
There's still some guys that are rolling. FA's still here, crushing it. David Mayo was with him in Carolina. People forget that.
Yep.
Any other notable Commanders? Curtis Samuel? Still here? Still kicking?
Oh, yeah.
So, just saying. Andrew Norwell, released. May his Commander's tenure rest in peace. I agree with Sam. The biggest storyline for sure, going into training camp this week is the offensive line. It's multifaceted in terms of how we talk about it, but I think that means we should talk about it. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. 301-230-0980. Non-quarterback division. What is the number one storyline going into Commanders training camp? We'll talk to you next here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We still got to get to what else happened this weekend. We kind of blew through it earlier where it was in the rundown. So perhaps we'll get to that coming up at 5:45. Crazy weekend in the world of sports. But talking about training camp in just a moment. Biggest non-quarterback storyline, 301-230-0980. But first, Anthony, I think we need to update the fine board. Real quick, take 2 minutes. We've had a lot of stuff since we last did because I was out of studio. So I'm gonna need to. If you're watching on the stream, you're about to get fine cam, and then I'm gonna go over there and do it. So Anthony, you're gonna have to cover for me while I go around the table.
I got you.
All right, and here I go.
All right, Craig is off to the whiteboard. I know for a fact I have a $5 fine that I forgot to put on the board.
I
Last
have a
week.
microphone now. We're good.
There he is.
Okay, we're back. That was not too bad. Oop, just dropped the marker. All right, so you picked up a $5, or not? It's not again. So the fine system is now a point system. Let's see, we can have to redo that little F there. Ooh, that was a bad job. I'll have to clean that up in a break. But we decided on a point system, not a dollar system. I feel like you had a five pointer for something on Friday, right?
Yeah, on Friday. What did I do? It was something towards the end of the show.
Yep. And then I had a 5-pointer today. And once we get to a total of 100 points, then that's the percentage that each of us pay for our lunch.
Mm-hmm.
So there we go. The total now, we are a quarter of the way to lunch.
Yes, sir.
And we've been doing this for a week.
Do you think we'll be there by Friday?
No. God, I hope not. I don't think that
would be bad.
I feel like as much fun as it is in terms of content, it's not a good thing for the show. Okay. Is that it? Did I have another one on Friday? I feel like I got another $5 on Friday.
How many do you have right now?
20 total.
Yeah, I think you're at 20.
Okay. And then you got 5, so we're at 25. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to officially hang the marker back up, and I'm going to run back around, and then we're going to take some calls on this training camp topic, yes, which is probably far more interesting to most of the audience. But you guys gotta follow along the whole show. The whole show is for everybody. We're creating a product here. 301-230-0980. And time to run.
I will now take over the show and watch Craig jog around the table. And he is back.
I'm back. We take it off of Fine Cam. And now it's time to take some calls. 301-230-0980. Definitely do not recommend running around a radio studio after eating yogurt in the break. That's a different story. Let's go to Fast Eddie. Eddie, get us started on the biggest non-quarterback training camp topic as we head into Commanders camp starting Wednesday.
Mr. Hoffman, thanks for taking my call, man. I love the show.
You got it.
Biggest thing for me is Chase Young, man. I mean, number 2 overall pick. He got hurt. You know, is that knee ever going to be the same? Who are we going to pay, him or Sweat? So that's the biggest thing for me. Can this guy produce at a high level and push his defense in that number 10, 6 overall kind of defense across the board? But Mr. Hoffman, real quick, going back to your early topic about the stadium being built.
Quickly, Eddie. That's your thing. You're fast, Eddie.
Quickly, I would love. Yeah. So Virginia, I would love you to call out people. No one's talking about that American Legion Bridge needing to be totally redone. It's falling apart. Can you imagine trying to drive out to a damn game in Virginia with 2 lanes open on the American Legion Bridge? It's already a cluster F as it is. And D.C., man, I mean, I'm an old school guy. Chinatown was a terrible area before it got redone. So RFK revitalized the whole area. It's good for D.C. It's good for its fans. I'll shut up and let you talk. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Eddie. That was very well done on the quickness there. The American Legion Bridge is terrible. I tend to think that it's going to be, more not necessarily Loudoun County. Like Northern Virginia, to me, I don't know. Like you get to the Dumfries thing. That's just a whole disaster of a different kind. If it's like Loudoun County, I guess, yeah, if you're coming from Maryland or D.C., you might have to go over that. I don't know. I lived in Reston for way too long to be a good judge on that because it's like 267. But also, people don't like taking the toll road. I know that's like a small thing of like it's $5 each way. It's an extra $10 on your trip total, depending on where exactly you're going. But like a lot of people would gum up Route 7. Like it would. There's a lot of logistical hurdles there. All right, back to football. I like the Chase Young take, by the way. To me, that's probably third. I still think the offensive line is going to be the make or break of the season. I trust Eric Bieniemy to make Sam Howell's job easy enough that he can do it, even if he doesn't excel. I don't know that he come out of the season necessarily knowing he's the answer, but enough to be competitive most times. The O-line has a huge say in that, and I trust Bieniemy, again, to put them in a better spot. Logan and I actually got real nerdy on like chips and things like that, slide protections this morning on Take Command. That episode will be out later today / first thing in the morning, so make sure you're subscribed to Take Command for that. But on Chase, like if he elevates his defense into a top 5 defense, we're talking about a completely different task for the offense. Frankly, they're just not going to have to do as much. And also, he's a guy that creates turnovers. I think that's a great call. All right, let's go to Alex. Alex, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Good evening, gentlemen, and Hoffman. Pleasure to speak to you. I definitely would agree with you. I think the O-line is going to be a make or break it, just like every other season that we've been watching. But I'm very intrigued by the tight end position, right? Logan Thomas, unfortunately, he's not really healthy for a full season. Cole Turner didn't really have that amazing rookie, year that we thought. I always thought big on Sammy Reyes. Obviously, he's not with us anymore, but I'm very intrigued as far as the tight end. Want to know what your thoughts are.
No, it's super interesting, and I am always locked into the tight end position. It's an occupational hazard of working with Logan Paulson. I feel okay at tight end, and man, like if Bieniemy stinks, I'm gonna look like the biggest idiot on the whole freaking planet. I won't be alone. I'll be in a big boat of idiots. But I basically would put it this way. Obviously, getting open is a skill. So being like, if Eric Bieniemy could get Travis Kelce open, Travis Kelce gets Travis Kelce open. So there's a little bit of a double-edged sword here. But they did scheme Travis Kelce open a lot in Kansas City. They found creative ways to use him that put him in advantageous situations. They cleared stuff out around him and allowed him to explore the space in a quite literal sense, find the most open of it in a passing lane for Patrick Mahomes, and Mahomes knew where to look. So if they could do that for Travis Kelce, like, how open can Logan Thomas get? How open can guys that aren't the focal point of an offense get when defenses are looking at them as afterthoughts? I tend to think that tight ends will be fine. I also think this offense is going to be built differently because it's going to be built around the best players, which are at the skill positions outside of tight end, the running backs, and obviously most of all the wide receivers. And I think that they'll use some of the tricks they use for a guy like Kelce to get Terry McLaurin open and get Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel in space. So, but I do think that there's enough skill there at tight end for Cole Turner, for Logan Thomas, who looks way better than he did last year, coming off the ACL, another year removed. And then Curtis Hodges, has shown flashes. I'm really bummed about Armani Rogers. But then they also got John Bates, who's a fantastic blocking tight end and can rumble into space as well. He's not totally useless in the pass game. So I think because you have so many guys that have really good traits, one of them is bound to be good, if not multiples. I don't think any of them will be stars, but I think it's a position worth watching for sure. 301-230-0980. Biggest non-quarterback storylines going into training camp. We've had suggestions at tight end. We've had suggestions, obviously, I think it's offensive line. We had Chase Young. Anthony, what do you got over there in your producer room wearing your sweet Capitol Hoops shirt?
I'm going with Chase Young. I agree with the caller. I just feel like it's time for this defense to be where everyone has, in a sense, projected it to be for years to come. Like, there have been times where we've shown flashes of what we could be, but it's time to actually put it all together. We don't necessarily have a ton of young guys anymore. All these guys, 3-4 years into the system, I think it's time to put it together and lean on the defense. Ultimately, I think defense wins championships. And
bold take.
Not a bold take. But if we can lean on our defense and, take the pressure off of Sam Howell and, the offense, I think that's going to be our best recipe for success.
I think that's a good one. This isn't really the question that was asked, but it's something that works in conjunction with that. I'm gonna remix the question. Like, what's the most underrated storyline of training camp? Maybe we should do this as a whole topic tomorrow. But I think corner is like perhaps the most intriguing position. You got 3 guys that you think could start in your first overall pick in Forbes, or your first round pick in Forbes. Obviously Kendall and then BSJ. You have a huge question at nickel. Can one of those guys slot in there, but also how much you actually going to play a nickel versus the Buffalo guys, all that stuff. But I think the reason I immediately went there when you started talking about chasing the D-line is if they can just cover for 0.2 seconds longer, if they can make quarterbacks hold the ball that much longer, Montez goes from an 8-sack guy to a 15-sack guy. He had so many quarterback hits last year and the pressure rates and all those kinds of things. And Duran was able to make that leap. So with a guy like Sweat in this contract year, a guy like Chase in a contract year, obviously Payne and Allen doing what they do, and you trust that they'll keep going even though they've already been paid. Not to mention James Smith-Williams and Case Tooler in contract years. F.A. Obata, I think, only signed a 1-year deal. So you got all these dudes that are hungry to get home. And can the secondary do more than they have in previous years? Because that's the unit that's really let them down. That's been the weakness as much as anything on defense. Linebacker, sure, hasn't been great, but I wouldn't say it's let them down in the big play, explosives kind of way that a secondary can. I think we trust the safeties. So what's the corner situation look like? I think that, to me, is one of the biggest questions that obviously we'll be following throughout camp, and then ultimately those close practice, or not the close, but the mixed practices with the Ravens, and then into the preseason and the regular season. So plenty of interesting storylines. We'll continue to go through all of them as the week goes. Our next episode of Take Command later in the week with me and Logan will be a full-on training camp primer, every aspect of camp broken down, revisiting all the things that we've already talked about, but kind of doing it all in one place to refresh everyone's memory. So look forward to that later in the week. We get back here on the Hoffman Show. We will take a look at what else happened this weekend. Non-Josh Harris category, non-Women's World Cup category, because we will talk about the U.S.'s performance in their 3-0 opener against Vietnam later in the show. But everything else, messy and beyond, next here on the Team 980.
Here's what's trending.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. I think I could find myself for what I just did, but I'm really just calling myself out in embarrassment. It's not a fine. I started talking before I turned the mic on, as opposed to when you don't turn the mic off to cough. I don't think that's a fine, because the radio audience didn't even know.
Yeah, I heard you.
Yeah, until you can hear me through the glass. And the streaming audience saw me talking for a second and was like, what's going on? And then it's like, oh, dummy, you forgot to turn his mic on. But I don't think that's a fine, actually. As we go through our system here. I think I'm good on that. Just embarrassed. It's like if you miss the play call and said hut, and then you just stand there and you're like, I don't know. It's not a penalty. You just look like an idiot. Anyway, there's that. So the Commanders are the Commanders for now. We are the Commanders, if you will. We got to get this. That is something. Can we find the engineers? Can the engineers be on the fine system if we can't get our board back? It certainly would help if I actually told them that was broken. But then the clock starts ticking. I don't know. Who else can help buy us lunch? But the question is, long term, will they be? And the offshore betting site, Bet Online, has some odds on this. And it's, take these for what they are. But what they are is ideas that are good fodder. First of all, the odds on favorites that they will. Again, I don't put a lot of stock in the actual odds at this point. They're trying to take people's money because that's what gambling outlets do. Even the, reputable American ones. They don't air condition the desert and build a bunch of casinos in Las Vegas because they lose. But interestingly enough, you do have this list of names, which I think, Anthony, includes a bunch of ones that nobody has actually considered and seem to have a heavy influence from one particular member of the Commanders ownership group. Have you seen this list of names yet?
The one from CBS Sports?
I got this from a JP tweet that is from this offshore book. What CBS Sports one are you looking at?
It was published 18 hours ago by Cody Benjamin.
Does it have the Spartans as the number one list? Or number one on the list?
No.
What's it have as its number one?
Washington, D.C. Football Club.
Okay, this offshore site has that as the second most common name. What
I don't see Spartans at all, actually.
All right, hold on. CBS Sports Commanders name. Let's both look at the same list here. You said Cody Benjamin?
Yes, sir.
Cody Benjamin. Ranking the top 5 alternate names. You got Washington, D.C. Football Club, DCFC, the Washington Pigskins, the Washington Red Hogs, the Washington Red Tails, and the Washington Majors. I think those all stink. Majors is the exact same thing as Commanders. It's just majors.
Yeah.
There's no good. The mages. What?
Nah.
There's no the problem with Commanders. There's two problems with Commanders. Two main problems in terms of the name itself. Obviously, the baggage that it has related to Snyder. That is kind of a separate bucket. But Commanders is a big long word that's hard to fit on merchandise, and there's no good way to shorten it. So the nickname isn't there. So Majors, you can't shorten it, but at least it's shorter as is. The Red Tails is interesting. It's got ties to the military, which they like. I do think there's a bit of irony in the franchise, who was the last one to integrate in the history of the NFL, going to the name that was the nickname for the Tuskegee Airmen. That feels a little exploitative. In a way, depending on how it's framed, it could be cool because, hey, yeah, we were late, but now look who we're honoring. I don't think that's too bad. But then, are you the Washington? For short, are you the Tails? That stinks. That's bad. Don't like it.
Yeah, too many puns you can use with tails.
The Washington Pigskins. You'd have the Skins nickname, But at that point, I feel like it's too close to the old one, which is problematic. Whether people agree with me on that, I know it's split. I will tell you it's problematic, and anything with Native American imagery should be off. And then you have DCFC, which I don't mind that / Washington football team. DCFC would catch on. That's catchier than WFT. Of these 5, that one's the best one. It's to me, that's the only usable one. Agree, disagree?
Excuse me. I had to sneeze.
Well, at least you did it off mic.
Yes.
No fine for you. He's learning, everybody.
You said FCDC?
DCFC.
DCFC.
Washington, D.C. Football Club.
Of the ones on this list, yes.
On this very terrible list, yes.
Yeah. I saw the names on JP's list.
All right, so let's go through those quickly. You got Spartans. There's just you're just another Spartan. But if you're going to get into an IP fight with Michigan State, having Magic Johnson on your side is a good one. I don't hate it. And then you have you got Sparty, I guess there's no real shortening of it.
There's no way Magic Johnson is going to co-sign the Commanders to get Spartan.
But that's the thing is like Spartans, like you think of the green, not the burgundy and gold. I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
They've got football team / football club next. I still think that might actually be the best option. Red Hogs, I don't mind at all. Because you're still going to want to be burgundy and gold. That is an essential part of the fan base. If you're picking new colors from scratch, it's not the ones I would pick, but with the nearly 100 years of history, I'm totally cool with keeping it. And then you also get Hogs for short. I think that's the best one I've seen so far.
And you get to keep the fight zone.
Yeah, I mean, you could hail to the Hogs.
Yep.
Hail to the Red Hogs. Yeah,
Yep.
That works.
Yep.
Okay.
HTTR will be back. Or is it RH?
I don't know. Or you go HTTH. Hail to the Hogs.
True. You could do that too.
I think you probably go HTTR.
Hey, look, that's my leader in the clubhouse right now.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Magic or Magicians?
No.
The Washington Armada?
No.
I do love a nickname that doesn't end in an S. I will say that. I don't like that one in particular for this team. But on principle, I do like... That's actually my uncle, one of his favorite trivia questions. There's like 5 or 7 teams, whatever it is, that in American sports that don't end in an S. Like it's like Orlando Magic.
Yep.
On down the list. And I used to be able to name them all really, really quickly. But that was when I was younger, and he quizzed me on things like that on a more regular basis. The Washington Presidents, no.
Not
Anybody local would nix that. Because when you say the Washington Presidents, you think of the big-headed guys running around at Nats Park. And it's a dumb name. The Washington Ambassadors?
No.
Trying too hard with the political puns. The Washington Brigade?
You like this. It doesn't end in an S.
I mean, on that front, yes, but I think that's actually worse than Armada.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan.
The Washington DCs is probably the single dumbest name on this list.
That might be the worst, yeah.
Like, what does that even mean?
No question.
Like, yeah, I'm a like if someone says like, oh yeah, I'm a Cowboy. Like if they play for Dallas, like, I'm a DC. What? No, you got one DC. Currently, it's Jack Del Rio. The Washington Defenders. You obviously run into copyright there with the
DC Defenders.
The DC Defenders. That's a no. Red Tails. We talked about that one on the last list.
Yeah.
Senators. That's the old baseball team. No. Sentinels. What? Yeah. No. You have the Wolves.
The Wolves.
Everyone wants Red Wolves. Could you do just Wolves? The Washington Wolves.
You got to put red in front of it.
But you'd get the alliteration if it's Washington Wolves. And you don't have to fight with Arkansas State.
But guess what? Oh, I forgot.
The lawyers.
Yep.
That's actually not terrible. The thing is, though, like your imagery forever has been, at least since the 80s with the Hogs, has been more of the Hogs. You have Major Tuddy, all that kind of stuff. Do you want to completely go down the wolf train?
Nah, because then you get rid of Major Tuddy real fast.
You're on Team Tuddy on this one, huh?
Maybe. Yeah.
The Washington Crimson? No. I mean, they've drafted a lot of Alabama players, but come on. The Washington Owls? No. The Red Pigs?
No.
That's just do hogs.
Yeah.
The Washington Monuments? No. And then the old nickname is at the end of this list, and that's a hard pass. As for some people, that's the only one they would accept. That's a hard pass.
Do you think it's been ruled out, like completely?
Yes.
Or do you think there's
yes,
2%, 3%,
no,
4%?
0%.
Okay.
0%. Because you have to remember taking my own personal feelings on it out of it, which in summary, my personal feelings are this. Native American groups are not a monolith. There is some disagreement within the Native American discourse about whether that is actually racist in a terrible term or it's relatively harmless and it's fine. And, some groups actually enjoy that, the honoring by using the use of Native American imagery. But considering there is a wide swath of people who are hurt by that, I'm in favor of the term that's not hurting people. So that's my personal take on it. Just you can pick something else. Pick the name that doesn't hurt anybody. But you have to remember who pushed that name out. It was Nike. It was FedEx. It was corporate sponsors that were like, yeah, we don't want to do this anymore. This is bad. This is racist. Or at the very least, it's racist enough that it's hurting our business. So if that's the case, it ain't coming back. It's bad business to bring it back in the long term. It might be good term, short business because a lot of people would be psyched, but in the long term, hell no, it's bad business, and thus there's no way it's coming back. All right, when we get back here on the Team 980, the NFL's top running backs got together this weekend to discuss the, let's call it, market deficiency that they have faced over the last couple years. Is there anything they can do, and why that meeting just, I think, makes them look kind of silly? It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Bottom of the hour, you've been waiting for all show. World Cup breakdown from the U.S.'s 3-0 victory over the weekend. Some very, very, very interesting tactical decisions for manager Vlatko Adanovsky. So we will look at those. And then real things, real people said in a real microphone. A couple of doozies from over the weekend. So that is how we spend the final half hour of the show. Over the next 10 minutes or so, though, let's talk about NFL running backs who got on a Zoom call this weekend. And one of the, I feel, two things can be true at once. I feel bad for them because they play a brutal position and are currently not being compensated for it. But also just goofy bad looks to get amongst themselves and complain to each other about how they're not getting paid on a Zoom call. As if anything could come out of that Zoom call and change the situation. And I will say, one of the most outspoken guys on all of this is one of the biggest problems. And the lack of self-awareness, I think, makes them look all very silly. And I hear you going, well, Craig, what are they supposed to do? I don't know. Talk to their peers. Talk to their agents. Say, hey, we're on the verge of training camp. We'll wait till the off season. Because what are they all going to do? Are they all going to hold out? Guess what would happen? The next guy up would play and prove the point of the teams. I understand their frustration. The running back position has not ascended in value in the way other positions have, the way as the salary cap has risen, right? I think it's since 2012, every other position, the franchise tag has gone up. Running backs, it's actually dropped. And I also hear, like when Zaire Franklin was on with us last week, he was very candid in saying, like, yeah, a big-time running back can change the game. Guys like Saquon, like, Alvin Kamara, like these guys change games. And they should be compensated. And as Z said, like, I stand with my brothers on that. But there's also just a reality of the market that, unfortunately for running backs, the difference in a great running back and a good running back is not very much. And thus the compensation is starting to match that. There's just too much data to drive for the problem to be resolved until the calculations change. And so I think, like, it's just why I look at it as so goofy, Ant, is because it's just like, what are y'all doing? Like, we got to get on a Zoom call. We got to get organized. So Austin Eckler, an undrafted rookie who now wants to get paid, can talk to us about the problem that he is the prime example of? Like, what are we doing? What do they hope to accomplish there besides looking mad?
I don't know, but I'm under the impression that, for running backs like, Saquon, Josh Jacobs, that are being offered the franchise tag, I'm thinking that they got to just bet on themselves. I mean, we've seen it here in Washington. We franchise tag Kirk Cousins 3 years? 2 years.
2 years.
2 years. 2 years straight, he bet on himself. He went out there, he balled out, he got his money, he got what he was, deserving of. So I'm thinking that if these guys, I understand that, they want security because, football is a dangerous sport. You never know, anything can happen. But if I'm them, I'm willing to bet on myself, go out there and suit up and do what I do best. And that's run, between the tackles and make big plays for my team. So that's where I'm under the impression of just betting on yourself and trying to prove to these owners that you are deserving of what you're asking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really smart from Nick Chubb, who's quoted in ESPN's story that was written in part by Jeremy Fowler. But he says, right now, there's nothing really we can do. We're kind of handcuffed with the situation. We're the only position that our production hurts us the most. If we go out there and run 2,000 yards with so many carries, the next year they're going to say you're probably worn down. It's tough. It hurts us at the end of the day. Guys that were on this call are Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Christian McCaffrey was on this call, Nick Chubb. I will say this, if I was an NFL running back, I'd want to be on the call to see what was said. But at the end of the day, like, how many of these guys, too, have been worth that kind of money? Like, Chubb's been healthy, but Barkley, up and down with injuries. McCaffrey, up and down with injuries. Josh Jacobs really just had the one great year last year. Tony Pollard received a franchise tag, and he actually signed it, but he's coming off a broken leg. Like, yeah, I get being upset, but this is what happens with markets. And, look, to be blunt, I work in a job that's been crushed by markets. Right? There's a lot of talented people in the media space. I would say our job, hosting a solo radio show, is one of the hardest things in this space. I will also say that. But, I'm not trying to undercut my own value here, but, there's a lot of talented people out there, and there's fewer jobs than there used to be. That is an advantage for the employers to get people cheaper. Also, revenue streams have changed, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in the media business in general, which, is a whole separate discussion, that has changed the financial structures. And I'm on the wrong end of the market. If I was doing this in the 1990s, my pay structure relative to percents of minimum wage and average wage in America and inflation and all that would look a lot better for me. It's just what it is. Early 2000s, be crushing it. Now it's different. If you're a running back in, the 90s, compared to your peers, you're making a lot more than right now where you're a lower paid position. People have figured out the market. And maybe eventually that swings, and there's going to be certain guys that on the way, the Giants, I'm surprised because Saquon does so much for them and is the focal point of their offense. I don't know how it particularly runs without him. But for a guy like Jacobs, I'm not surprised. Hey, you're a big bruising running back who had one 1,600-yard season. Cool. You remember the name Olandis Gary? Does that name mean anything to you, Anthony?
Can't remember.
Olandis Gary was a running back for the Denver Broncos. He's a D.C. guy. For all I know, Olandis Gary's listening right now. Olandis Gary, as a rookie for the 99 Broncos, ran for 1,200 yards, or almost 1,200 yards. Never rushed for over 400 again. 5-year career. These are the kinds of things that happen. And the Broncos went through a ton of guys like that, where you just, that Mike Shanahan, Gary Kubiak offense just produced a bunch of running backs. And so them's the breaks. The next year, let's see. Who was the guy the next year for them? Was Terrell Davis back? I mean, Terrell Davis was another guy who was like that. But, Mike Anderson runs for almost 1,500 yards the next year. Let's see how close was Mike Anderson ever to that number again. He rushed for 1,000 yards one more time in his career. He was a rookie. Rushed for almost 1,500 yards. You can just find running backs that, if you have the right O-line, have a good year. And that is, unfortunately, the way the league goes. And it's taken a long, long time for, I think, GMs to catch on, but there is no solution here unless there's the kinds of things that we talked about last week, where you change the CBA, that if you hit certain performance goals while on a rookie contract, you are going to automatically get paid a certain amount. And the CBA is not going to be up for a while, so running backs can have Zoom calls all they want. There's not anything they can do. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, the US won 3-0 Friday night, but did they actually prove that they should be the favorites in the tournament? What did we learn? What do we still want to know? That's next here on the Team 980. right, it's the Hoffman Show, Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, you know how I know it's the final half hour of the show?
Why?
Your boy is getting hungry.
Ooh. Me too.
I'm hungry. I didn't eat. I did a terrible job eating today.
I had me a Crustable.
Uncrustable.
Oh, Uncrustable.
That's kind of the whole point.
Yeah.
That was funny.
I misspoke.
That was funny. Yeah, I had like a little bit of toast this morning, and then went and worked out, and then had a protein shake, and the next thing I knew, it was 2:00, and I hadn't had real food all day. That was a bad job by your boy. But we're getting close to dinner time, and I'm excited. So you said you went to watch all the soccer on Friday night.
Yes, sir.
At a bar. What was the vibe in the bar? Because I get the sense all around D.C. that the Women's World Cup watch parties were insane. We were exhausted at watching it home, but I saw all of the like the footage and everything from the bullpen. Oh, that place was jammed. Like as packed as it was for Burgundy and Sold, if not more so.
Dang.
That place was crazy.
So at first I wanted to go to, it was a sports bar, but they were already packed. So I couldn't even get in. I couldn't even go in there. And then Quincy's was my backup plan. And it was, a decent crowd, I would say. It wasn't packed as a sports bar, but everybody was attentive. Everybody was watching the game. And I was shocked or surprised a little bit from like how the game began. I didn't know Vietnam was going to be as aggressive as they were. Trinity Rodman had gone down, and
yeah, they were feisty.
Yeah, they were. So it was definitely interesting to start, and then I guess as USA started to click, they started putting the goals together and things of that nature.
So Sophia Smith happened.
Yes.
Which we could have told you / we tried to warn you, world.
Yeah.
Sophia Smith is coming. Actually, I meant to look this up. I might look this up in a second.
And we left one goal out there.
Yeah, Alex Morgan's got it.
Alex Morgan came up short.
Get that bad PK out of your system now.
Yes.
She's one of the best in the world at that, and that was an awful, awful take from her. Yeah. But I got to check. The Guardian does a list every year of the top women's footballers in the world, and I don't think Sophia Smith was like in the top 10, and it makes me want to throw that list in the garbage. I mean, they watch a lot of European players. There's so many good players in Europe that those of us that are more focused on the NWSL and American soccer are not quite as aware of, for sure. But, like, you can't tell me there's 10 better than her. 2 goals and an assist in her debut in the World Cup. But I want to even take a step back. The lineup selections are wacky from Vlatko Andonovski. We talked about all kinds of different possibilities on the show on Friday with Andre Carlisle, and it's the 3 that we thought it would be up front. And also, by the way, some of the problems that we anticipated could have happened up front with Trinity Rodman, Sophia Smith, and Alex Morgan. Then, in the midfield, Savannah DeMello gets the surprise start, although I had a weird feeling about that. That's Rose Lavelle's position. Lavelle is coming back from injury. She came in the final 30 minutes and looked incredible, which is very, very encouraging that she's going to be able to come back in and just be her because, man, Rose is one of a kind in terms of what she can do from that offensive midfielder, that 10 position. But playing DeMello over Ashley Sanchez from the Washington Spirit, I just don't agree with. DeMello's fantastic, great young player, has had a hell of a season at Louisville, but I think Ash is the closest thing that I've seen to someone like Rose, unless you're, at least on the U.S. roster, where she brings that creativity and she also brings speed. And DeMello brings a lot of technical ability, and you saw some of that in some good moments. But Ash's work rate is really high. She is constantly trying to press opponents and create turnovers, which I think against a team like Vietnam would have been advantageous. And I think the individual creativity against a team, so with the strategy that Vietnam played is called a low block. So basically, it's just park the bus, pack it all in, create no space. It's a zone defense that's forcing teams to shoot threes, and it's like, hey, if you can make threes, that's that, or it's almost a prevent defense, right? And someone like that is individually brilliant can manipulate that space. And I would have liked to see Sanchez there. I am biased as hell because she's someone that I covered and was when I worked for the team. That was her rookie year. Like, she's someone I would consider a friend in all transparency. But like, I just think from like a tactical standpoint, that one really I thought was interesting. But here's the thing: they knew they were beating Vietnam, and DeMello that's her second ever appearance for the national team. She actually made the team, having never appeared for the national team before. So she gets some minutes in the send-off game, and then she gets this start. Are you getting her minutes in case you need her and what she does later in the tournament? That, I think, is justifiable. I hate that for Ash, who's also looking to make her World Cup debut, although she's played a lot for the national team, including in some tournaments. But I didn't love that decision. Like, if that's the play, okay. But you also have another match on Wednesday. Going Friday, Wednesday is a quick turnaround. Rose still probably not ready to play a full game. So whether it's Ash who starts on Wednesday or Rose who starts and then Sanchez comes in, I am curious to see how they rotate things to that 10 position. The stunner lineup-wise that I think worked out a lot better for the U.S., because DeMello was fine, was Julie Ertz playing center back. Ertz, who you might remember from previous tournaments as Julie Johnston, for those that check in every 4 years. Yes, she is married to Zach Ertz. It's been Julie Ertz for a while now, but she is, at her peak a couple years ago, played at a level that has basically never been seen at her position by any American ever. But that position was the defensive midfielder position, now taken by Spirit co-captain Andy Sullivan, who's playing at an extraordinarily high level, even if it's not that legendary level that Julie hit a couple years ago. And there was this big question of, like, how do you get Julie and Andy on the field? Is Julie going to take Andy's spot? And Andy's played remarkably well. I don't think that she deserves to be off the field at all. And so what happened was they just said, we're going to put Julie back at her old position. And whether that is a long-term thing or not, I think is, again, like, it puts something in the eyes of the Netherlands and Portugal, their next two opponents, of people, of the opponents that they'll face in the knockout round, that you have to prepare for this. And it also makes the roster make a lot more sense, because when Vlatko named this roster after Becky Sauerbrunn got hurt, and who the U.S. captain all the way in the lead up and wasn't going to be ready for the tournament, they only brought two center backs at that position. And so to see Ertz come in and play that well, I thought was highly encouraging. And, you know, that's good. I think that the concern for me comes in the lack of crispness and the decision-making in the final third, which is big fancy soccer terminology for, like, close to goal, right? Split the field in thirds, your defensive third, your middle third, and then your attacking third where you're going to score. And it's hard. That is the hardest part of the sport. Sometimes I criticize soccer people because they will say very silly things about decision-making and execution in the final third. It's like, oh, they could have scored 6 today. I'm like, do you ever watch the sport? People don't win, and Germany won 6-0 in their opener, but, like, at the highest levels, 6-0 score lines don't happen on a regular basis. But U.S. did score 3. Morgan had a PK stopped. That would have been 4. And there was a couple of other opportunities that I think they could have converted. But I think they could have created a lot more if the pieces fit together better. And this gets into the crux of how brave is Vlatko willing to be with this roster. Because Alex Morgan has been one of, if not the best player on the U.S. for certainly the last World Cup. She was up there as one of the best, and really the last 2. This is her 4th total. She was an impact player in her first one when she bust onto the scene out of what felt like nowhere to most of us back in 2011 as I think a 23-year-old. And are you willing to put her on the bench in certain situations? Because I think this team is better off with Sophia Smith playing that central striker role, the 9, and getting players who can create more and get better crosses in and are more dynamic one-on-one on the wings, because, like, Sophia's phenomenal at creating for herself and creating for others out of that central area, but she's not quite as effective as a winger as, say, Trinity Rodman, who was awesome in this game doing exactly that. I think Lynn Williams coming off the bench, and I think what you saw in the final 30 minutes was what happens when you get that creativity on the field. Because not only did Rose Lavelle come out there and do the things that she does, but Megan Rapinoe and her ability to deliver unpredictable passes to get players open and put them on a dime, I think really opened things up for the U.S. Pino's not in a place at this point in her career where and coming off some recent injuries, where she's ready to play 90 minutes and like start and do the whole thing. But I do think later in the tournament, I could see a starting lineup of Rapinoe, Sophia Smith, and Trinity Rodman, and like let them play for 60 minutes together, see what kind of magic that opens up. And then you have Morgan to come in off the bench. You have, just incredible world-class speed in Alyssa Thompson, the 18-year-old, and Lynn Williams coming off the bench as well, depending on if you need goals or you need to defend more. Like there's attributes they bring that are very valuable late in games. But I think when you try to figure out how the pieces fit together, I actually believe that the best version of this, I can't believe I'm saying this because she's so good, but I think the best version of the U.S. roster against what they'll face most often defensively is probably with Alex Morgan coming off the bench. And it feels crazy, but I think is probably where we're at, which is also a credit, by the way, to Sophia Smith, the reigning NWSL MVP, and for my money, the best player on the U.S. roster, even though she's 22 years old. All right, that is a little World Cup talk. Obviously, we'll get a little bit more coming up on Wednesday before the game against the Netherlands. That is coming up 9 p.m. Wednesday, and then over the weekend they play Portugal. That's the goofy 3 a.m. bit. We're gonna have to tape that one, Anthony. We're not getting up at 3 a.m. I think there's a chance the quarterfinals at 4 a.m. I would consider a 4 a.m. wake up, but a 3 a.m. is far too in the middle of the night.
I might be up
for the 3 a.m.
I'm joking. No,
I'll say the start of your day or the end of your day.
I will be asleep.
That is the correct answer. You know a good thing to be doing at 3 a.m.?
What?
Sleeping. It's the only correct thing to be doing at 3 a.m. All right, it's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Quick look at what's trending, and then real things real people said into real microphones.